In 1925, the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad received 10 new steam locomotives from the Baldwin Locomotive Works for use on their narrow-gauge rail lines in Colorado and New Mexico. The locomotives were numbered from 480 to 489 and were given the designation of K-36. K is short for Mikado, the name of the 282 wheel arrangement of the locomotives. 36 indicates an approximate tractive effort of 36,000 pounds. They were designed to replace many of the railroad's ancient 280 steam locomotives, many of which were approaching 50 years of service on the narrow gauge. The first K-36 locomotives were delivered to the Rio Grande narrow gauge locomotive shops in Salida, Colorado in late August of 1925. For nearly half a century, these bulky, outside-frame steam engines pulled heavy freight trains over most of the Rio Grande's major narrow-gauge rail lines. Later on, the K-36s were also used on the railroad's passenger trains, particularly the San Juan Express between Alamosa and Durango, Colorado. This class of locomotives is one of the most widely recognized groups of narrow-gauge engines in history. The main reason for this? The K-36 also happens to be one of the best preserved classes of steam locomotives anywhere in the world. Of the 10 locomotives constructed, 9 still exist, and 8 continue to see regular daily use on former Rio Grande narrow-gauge rail lines where they have operated for the last 100 years. Only locomotive 485 was scrapped in 1955 after it fell into a turntable pit in Salida, Colorado, and was damaged. Engine 483, while no longer operable, remains preserved at the Cumbres and Toltec Scenic Railroad on static display. To mark a century of these well-known and well-celebrated locomotives, we're going to go through the entire roster of 8 operable K-36 locomotives, beginning with number 480 and proceeding all the way through 489. We will see locomotives 480, 481, 482, and 486 on the Durango and Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad, and locomotives 484, 487, 488, and 489 on the Cumbres and Toltec Scenic Railroad, as these engines pull trains of tourists as well as recreated freight trains from the days of the Rio Grande. Well, that's the Rio Grande fleet of K-36 locomotives. Thanks for joining me for this look at these historic engines. As always, a special thanks to all my supporters on Patreon. Do you have any thoughts on the K-36 you'd like to share with me? Post them below in the comments section. If you would like notifications whenever I post to YouTube, click on the subscribe button and select the Receive All Notifications option. I'll be back next Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time for a brand new railroading adventure right here on the YouTube channel. That's it for now. Until next time, I'm Mike Armstrong. I'll see you down the line. Thanks for watching.